So as we're midway through the NBA season, we're seeing a lot of coverage still happening for teams like the Los Angeles Lakers and the Golden State Warriors, even though they're sitting in the 9th and 10th seed of their conferences. And this is one of the many flaws of today's current NBA media landscape, in which stars are way too emphasized instead of team roster construction when it comes to predicting teams that are possibly going to go ahead and compete for an NBA championship. And when you take a look at the landscape, especially with this new CBA kicking in next season and the league beginning to transition into a new phase where the league this summer will expand the second round of the NBA draft into its own event, as now the draft will take place in 2 days. And the reason why this is being emphasized is because those second round picks are going to become very valuable, especially for teams that are competing on a championship level. And we're also going to begin to see the trend of drafting that second round polished player, perhaps someone that did 4 years in college already and quickly come in and contribute to teams that are competing at a very high level. We see this play out with the Denver Nuggets as they have numerous draft picks, guys like Christian Braun, Julian Strawweather, Peyton Watson, and other undrafted rookies, all hovering around the age of 24 or entering into their second season while hitting the age of 22. So this will be a growing trend, especially as teams have multiple star players that are eating up a lot of cap space and teams avoiding being in that second apron within that luxury tax while trying to avoid the scenario just having restrictions placed on them due to the fact that they're in that second apron. So the second round picks are going to become more and more valuable. And another team that's been way ahead of this curve and I want to emphasize on is the Miami Heat. And you can see the continuous trend of them just adding players to their roster instead of chasing stars, like the way they avoided Damian Lillard and Bradley Beal. Not only their contracts are way too high, the fit wouldn't have worked out quite as well. And even though they lost a few of their role players from last year's finals run, they were still able to yet find players that fit well into their system. Guys like James Jaquez Jr. and Jovic. And the Heat, just like the Denver Nuggets, are continuing following this trend of not only finding players that are older and may have done 4 years in college in the draft and fitting them right into their system, but the Heat also possess a lot of intangibles that tend to get overlooked by the national NBA media overall at large. Some of the Heat players, particularly their star Jimmy Butler, has intangibles similar to Jalen Brunson with the footwork, the discipline, the relentlessness. And another championship player that you could look at that played years ago was the Portland Trailblazers' current coach, Chauncey Billups. Another guy that was overlooked because maybe his athleticism wasn't quite there, but the intangibles was definitely there. Big shot Billups. The way he performed in very crucial moments, that's something that you cannot measure. And we've seen a very talented player in Chris Paul actually fold in the biggest playoff moments, including that turnover he had in the NBA Finals going up against the Bucks. Again, this is going back to my point of the NBA media at large sometimes getting too stuck on stars. That's why they're still saying the Warriors and the Lakers, even though we're more than midway through the season, they're still saying that these teams, even though sitting at the 9th and 10th seed, could still make their way past the play-in and have a deep playoff push. And the same thing also applies to Dame and Giannis out in Milwaukee. Even though they have a flawed roster construction in which Doc Rivers numerous times have even stated when he went on his little press run that he should have never really took over this job midway through the season, is because the new ownership, they sort of star chased themselves into constructing a flawed roster that's very top heavy. When you look at teams like the Miami Heat, they're going to give the Milwaukee Bucks a lot of issues going into the playoffs, especially with that weak ass perimeter defense the Bucks have. The constant off-ball movement by the Miami players, even guys coming off the bench, is going to give that superstar-driven roster, that very top-heavy, talented roster, a lot of issues because they lack depth. And the Heat don't really seem concerned about where they finish as long as they get into the playoffs. Because what got them to the NBA Finals 2 out of the last 4 seasons is the intangibles. They have a lot of heart, similar to many legendary boxers we've seen over the years. Guys like Sugar Ray Leonard, Bernard Hopkins, Marvin Hagler. Some of the fights those guys had, like the brawl in Montreal or Marvin Hagler versus Tommy Hearns, one of the greatest 3 rounds of boxing in history. We see the heart that these guys come back with, not wanting to lose. The Heat have a lot of those intangibles, and you can smell it and see it right off these guys, especially with Jimmy Butler. The NBA is such a star-driven league that the Philadelphia 76ers did not realize when they went to the Eastern Conference Finals with Jimmy Butler on their roster that the person really to get rid of at the time was Ben Simmons, not Jimmy Butler. But again, the NBA media being so star-driven, maybe because of the marketing, they did not even realize it should have never been Butler to leave and go to Miami. It should have been the 76ers to resign him and then send Ben Simmons in a trade somewhere else. But yet that Eastern Conference Finals appearance by the 76ers is the pinnacle, and I would say the peak of the 76ers with this whole Joel Embiid era. But Jimmy Butler spoke about the ups and downs of the Miami Heat season and what's their main focus, and how at this very moment, approaching the end of the season, he's getting ready to rev the engines up and activate playoff Jimmy. And they're not really too concerned about what seeding they get as long as they get in. This is how confident the Heat are.
I'm just different. I think this is when you're supposed to be playing your best basketball and you have to find a way to get your team to win these games when you're talking about the playoffs coming around. But even right now, you're getting everybody into their roles. You just keep a couple things in your pocket all year long, and whenever you do it at a certain point of the year, they deem it something else like playoff Jimmy. But it's just me playing the long game throughout the season. I know that I'm really good at this game, and I know I could do a lot of things well on the basketball court. There are just times when you have to step it up a notch. You can't show the opponent everything now. You have to always keep people guessing. Whatever y'all want to call it, playoff Jimmy or that crazy motherfucker emo Jimmy, I don't care. We're good, man. I just want to get into the playoffs. That's it. We get into the playoffs, then we and I can take care of a lot. But I think us as a group, we're going to be just fine.
And the Heat are indeed playing the long game. And they've done this plenty of times before where they rest guys like Jimmy Butler, like last year, before making their Eastern Conference final run against the Boston Celtics. And the Heat are playing the long game during the season because they've done this before where they kind of took their foot off the pedal during the regular season and then they rev things up when it came close to playoff time. And last year we seen them make the finals. And they implemented the same tactic in 2020 when they made the finals against the Lakers. But again, the growing trends of teams drafting 4-year players in the late rounds who are a bit more polished and can come in and contribute right away. This is a growing trend. And their rookie sensation, Jaime Jaquez, sat down with JJ Redick, and he was asked about the old stereotype of the 4-year college player. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'll check in.
Do you think there's a bias? Like you staying 4 years in college, do you think that led to some of this a little bit as well as people being like, okay, there's a reason why he didn't come out?
I don't know, honestly. Maybe. I would just say this. I know that staying 4 years is kind of like an anomaly nowadays, but I think at the same time, like everyone's path is different. I know there's guys in the league today that have played 4 years in college and are having great careers. I mean, Jalen Brunson, for example, another guy, Josh Richardson on my team. And then I think, there's plenty of others. Malcolm Brogdon, I think, played 4 years as well. I mean, there's been plenty of guys that have done it. And I don't want to say I'm the only one or I'm starting this. There's guys that have done it before. And I wouldn't say it's for everybody. You got freshmen nowadays who are going number 1 pick, and I'm all for that. It's just whatever path you feel is best for you. And, that's the message I try to preach.
Keep in mind, this trend will begin to shift, as now Adam Silver had announced that the NBA draft will be a 2-day event as teams want more time to evaluate the second round, because the second round picks nowadays will be very important, especially with this new CBA, for teams like the Denver Nuggets, the Miami Heat, the Phoenix Suns. That's one way Kevin Durant could replenish that Suns roster outside of him, Beal, and Devin Booker. We don't know if Grayson Allen is going to qualify and get more money in the offseason, as he's had so far a great year. But one way for them to counteract just having that expensive roster year in, year out is to do what the Denver Nuggets did. Draft 4-year guys, either in the late first round or into the second round, or just get undrafted guys. But just getting guys that could overall come in and contribute and understand certain team concepts right away. These are going to be very valuable assets to have. And it makes sense why the league had expanded the second round of the NBA draft into its own separate day.
Another one. Yeah, 4 years. Yeah.
You
Just
said I
omitted
wasn't a
that
good
one.
player? All right. This guy, man, he's just throwing subtle shots and direct shots. All right.
The stigma surrounding the 4-year college player, it's gonna come down a notch. Definitely that stereotype will change due to the landscape. And mainly the biggest contributing factor to this is how teams will construct these rosters under the new CBA rules.
What do you think? What do you think though? Staying 4 years gave you in terms of an advantage by the time you got here to the NBA and playing for the Miami Heat?
I think the biggest thing or the biggest advantage that I gained is understanding winning and what that takes and what that means, and really understanding the little things about basketball. So I think, in 1 year as a freshman, it's kind of hard to really take that in and understand what that is. And, you have 4 years of development, especially under the coach that I had, where winning was everything. If we ever lost a game, it was like the end of the world. So learning what it took and the work and the preparation, I think really helped me to take that next step and go into the NBA with that knowledge of, what it takes to win and what that really means.
And with some of the most talented draftees coming into the league, guys like Jonathan Kuminga, Jalen Green, Scoot Henderson, they've all come up under systems where winning is not emphasized. That's why we see the G League ignite and the NBA sort of phase out that program, because guys are still coming in not ready, not understanding certain team concepts. That's why you see Kuminga have all the tangibles. He jumps high, he's very athletic, he can clearly play the game, but we see him bump heads with Steve Kerr because there's a lack of understanding for certain concepts. So this is some of the intangibles that the 4-year college player that gets drafted in the second round, late first round, these are the type of things that they come with. But we can't see it because it doesn't pop out physically on the court. It's all up here in their head. But all that progression and information is already downloaded. When in the inverse, we see guys like Jalen Green playing freestyle basketball out in Houston the first 2 years he was out there with no type of structure. And we've seen very similar struggles in transitioning into the NBA format from Scoot Henderson and Jalen Green. All three of these guys come out of G League Ignite, in which that program by the league does not stress winning enough. It's almost like a glorified AAU that actually gives guys a salary.
I got a question on that, actually, because Coach K used to always talk about unpacking your bags.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first time he referenced that, he was talking about Elton Brand. And Elton came in as a freshman, had some success. There was a lot of buzz about him. That class, I think William Avery left after his sophomore year. Elton left after his sophomore year. Corey Maggette left after his freshman year. This was all 99. It's the first time anybody had left Duke early. And so when I got there in 02, it was, he was talking to, we had a heralded freshman class. He talked to us about unpacking your bags. And all that meant was that you're sort of all in to your time, whatever your time is. My time was 4 years. Your time was 4 years. Some guys, their time is a year. Some guys, it's 2 years. But while you're there, unpacking your bags. And I think one of the issues, there are many, but one of the issues right now in the one and done era is that I don't think not enough guys unpack their bags. And what happens there is the two things you just talk about. You don't necessarily learn the value of winning and losing. And because your bags aren't unpacked and you're not all in because your mind's somewhere else, or, you were a heralded high school player, McDonald's All-American, and I'm going to leave after this year, and I know I'm going to leave after this year. You're not actually paying attention to whatever's being taught. And specifically, I want actually specifics, like what are the things? Because there's a lot of guys that have said this, like Antoine Jameson said this recently. Pop said this recently. We've got all these guys that have uber skills, but the fundamentals, I think Pop referenced maybe screening angles or Pop referenced footwork, whatever. The fundamentals have been lost a little bit. So like specifically, like for me, I'll give you an example. I was a catch and shoot guy.
Yeah.
I was a catch and shoot guy in high school. When I got to Duke, two things happened. Later on in my career, I got to play on the ball. I got to run some pick and rolls. And then I spent so much time, not on YouTube, but actual film, studying Reggie Miller, Ray Allen, Rip Hamilton. So I actually got better at playing off the ball. I got better in my movement. I got better setting up screens. Those were the things for me that mattered once I got to the NBA. What were the things for you that mattered that you learned, the fundamentals, because you stayed 4 years?
I mean, man, I could go on for a really long time. I'll say one that sticks out to me that my coach always said is, honestly, it's a pretty easy one, but listening. Like, listening and focusing, understanding scouting reports, understand, what coach is trying to tell you, not how he's saying, but what he's saying, things like that. And then, I mean, defensively, what it means to, stunt in the gap and get back out to the corner, being help without giving up open threes, understanding what the low man is, offensively understanding spacing, how to get a great shot, understanding the importance of just swinging the ball once or twice and how much that opens the floor. I mean, understanding, boxing out, rebounding, the importance of the game within the game.
A lot of the things that he's describing are the exact issues that are causing Ume Udoka and Jalen Green to bump heads out in Houston. And also Steve Kerr and Jonathan Kuminga.
Like, all right, if we win the rebounding battle, they're a great rebounding team, and their offense relies heavily on offensive rebounds. Okay, that's something that we need to take away. Listening to that and applying it into your game is one of the biggest, skills I think anyone can have is really just listening and applying that into the game. Or, who is their main guys? Who is a shooter? What hand do they like to go to? Take away those buckets and, transition, for example. We got to get the rebound secure so we can set up or we got to go back and set up our defense. Just things like that, I think are really crucial. And over 4 years of that constantly getting pounded into your head, it really sticks.
Yeah, it becomes programmed into your brain a little bit.
Exactly.
Were there any things like conceptually that were different when you got to the Heat?
Yeah, I mean, I think, spacing and I wouldn't necessarily to me, college is plays and the NBA is a lot of actions. So I think that conceptually was a big thing. Obviously, shorter shot clock, you got to get shots on goal. But just, running quick actions and being unpredictable. Whereas in college, you got a lot of set plays. Okay, let's set up. Let's take our time. Let's get the best shot possible. In the NBA, it's like, all right, let's get a great action. First great shot available. We got to take it because, the shot clock's short. And a lot of times if you pass up a good shot, you're not going to get a better one. And so I think that's a big thing transitioning from college into the NBA is just understanding how much faster the game moves and pacing and how much easy buckets are of value and just things like that.
Those concepts are not really stressed out like that because overall that program is really to cultivate the talents of certain key guys. So let's just say if someone is in G League Ignite and they don't make it to the NBA draft, so they're right back into the G League Ignite. Now their job becomes to help out the new crop of players coming in to elevate their game. So it's almost like they have to take a back burner just to showcase the brand new talent that's coming in. And winning games is never even stressed out. They're just playing against other pro level talent. But at the end of the day, the whole premise is for the older guys to cultivate the games of the younger guys. So they have to give them the shots. They have to help them develop. So you start to see why Kuminga has taken so long to really impact the game and why Steve Kerr is hesitant at times to play him. And you also see why Scoot Henderson went through major struggles, especially early in the season out in Portland. And then finally going to the Houston Rockets, you see why them getting better polished players like Fred VanVleet, Dylan Brooks, and also a coach that's going to emphasize a system, an actual culture. You see why all of a sudden Jalen Green does not fit as well with that whole infrastructure. Because the same freestyle basketball he was playing in his first 2 years with the Rockets, that style of play that he's so accustomed to from AAU to G League Ignite to coming into the league and being allowed to play like that for the first 2 years, this shit just doesn't work, man. He might be learning these concepts for the very first time. That's the ironic part. And best believe there's been many top level talented players in the history of the NBA that have actually stressed out that they didn't learn certain concepts until there was about 9 years into the league. I mean, we seen Amari Stoudemire stating that he had to learn defensive concepts once he joined the New York Knicks. And this is a player that made multiple Western Conference finals, but yet he was learning things that he should have learned within his first 2 years of being in the league.
Okay, we're going to run this play. You're going to come off a pin down. Then you're going to swing it to Terry. And then Jaime is going to run out of the pick. And then he's going to slip. And then we're going to get bad because we want to get to that chase action with Duncan and Bam on the weak side, right? That's the ultimate thing. That's a set play. Whereas in the NBA, you have to understand all these concepts on the fly. It's more free flowing is what I'm saying and what you're saying too. So I understand that. I just wanted to clarify exactly what you were talking about.
JJ Redick right here will stress and emphasize that they knew exactly what they needed on their roster. And Jaime was the perfect fit because of the intangibles as well as the tangibles that he brought to the table. Because they get a blunt of the blame for not getting Damian Lillard, missing out on Bradley Beal. But these guys in reality have never really played a style of basketball that contributes to long playoff pushes and just overall being a winning formula of basketball. Dame out in Portland was allowed to chuck up a bunch of shots. His team was always at the bottom of the league as far as defense. And Bradley Beal was stuck in Washington in no man's land. All he had to do was get his points. His team had no expectations at all. So it's not like all of a sudden these guys are going to flip the switch when they come down to Miami and make the sudden changes and get acclimated right away. This is why Pat Riley was hesitant about trading for these two guys. Because for starters, Pat Riley already knows what championship players look like. And for two, because of their salary bump, the juice just wasn't worth the squeeze.
I was talking to Spo last week about you as well. And something he said to Mark Jones was he was talking about how one of your advantages is just conceptual, or not conceptually, but intrinsically your matchups night to night. You can find an advantage depending on the matchup. He mentioned guys like OG, right? He didn't say him specifically, but guys like OG that are like size, that can move their feet, right? That's not an advantage. But if you're being guarded by a bigger player, right, you can go out to the perimeter, you can use your handle, you can use your footwork, get by him. You're being guarded by a smaller player, you can go down to the post, use your size. And I thought that was really interesting that he found that, and he told us, he's like, I found that right away with Jaime. A previous conversation I had, he was like, he really struggled the first day of training camp. And then the second day I was like, oh shit, that kid's got something. Did you feel like you struggled the first day of training camp? Maybe it wasn't training camp, maybe it was just preseason pickup. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you get there, it's all coming at you so fast. You know, you're trying to learn different things. You know, you're seeing guys, and you know, you're in the NBA for the first time, and you're just, you know, and in my eyes, I was trying not to mess anything up. But I think, you know, eventually you get more comfortable, and then I realized that, you know, I belonged here. This is this is why they drafted me, and this is what I was here to do. So I guess as the time went on, I just became more comfortable. And as far as, you know, trying to find an advantage, I think it's the most important thing is just trying to find or taking what the defense gives you. I think that's the biggest thing, and trying to slow the game down as much as possible to try to find advantages in any way I can.
So there you have it. The Miami Heat are definitely not a team to sleep on. And with Jaime Jaquez, he is part of the growing trend of the archetype of player that teams are looking for, either in the late first round or second round. But players like him will be very valuable going forward, especially for the teams that are already competing on a high level. They're going to want to draft guys that maybe played 3 to 4 years in college. Their rookie NBA season will be at the age of 23, 24, and they're ready to contribute right away, especially with their salary not being as high. Because with the new CBA, having players like this is going to be very important. And everything kind of comes together when you look at the fact that the league is extending the second round of the NBA draft to its own individual day. So it is what it is. This will be a growing trend going forward. And until next time, you fellas stay safe. Peace.